The soft hues of dusk began to settle over the Sea of Galilee, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. The disciples sat in a quiet circle, the warmth of the day still clinging to the air, but the coolness of night was beginning to make its presence felt. They had traveled far that day, witnessing miracles and hearing the teachings of their beloved Master, Jesus. Yet despite the peacefulness of the evening, one of them, Peter, was caught in a storm that no one could see. Peter had always been a man of action. His faith was bold, his loyalty fierce. He had walked on water at the Lord's call, stood by Jesus when others doubted, and had been told by Jesus himself that he would be the rock upon which the church would be built. But in the quiet of that evening, with the gentle breeze coming off the sea, Peter felt far from being the rock he was meant to be. In fact, he felt like a man who was sinking, drowning under the weight of his own fears and failures. The other disciples, sensing something in the air, spoke in hushed tones, their laughter from earlier conversations fading away. They could feel the shift in the mood but didn't fully understand the source. Their eyes often turned to Peter, sitting a little apart from the group, staring out at the water, lost in thought. Jesus, sitting among them, had not said a word yet. He was quiet, watching Peter with a gaze that penetrated far deeper than what anyone else could see. Jesus could feel Peter's struggle, the battle in his heart that had been raging for weeks, maybe even months. The burdens Peter carried were not just the visible ones of leadership and responsibility. No, his burdens were much deeper, rooted in self-doubt, fear of failure, and an overwhelming sense of inadequacy. Finally, Jesus spoke, breaking the silence in a way that felt as if he were speaking to the air itself. "Peter," Jesus said gently, his voice like a warm breeze carrying across the sea, "come, sit by me." The other disciples immediately grew silent, their attention shifting fully to Peter. They had seen Peter lead, they had seen him be strong, but tonight they saw something different in his posture. A weariness, a heaviness that spoke of inner battles. Peter hesitated, feeling the eyes of his brothers upon him. But when he looked at Jesus, the Master's eyes were filled with such compassion and understanding that Peter couldn't resist. He rose slowly and walked over to Jesus, sitting down beside him. His hands were trembling and his heart was pounding in his chest. Peter had always been the strong one, the one who others looked to for courage. But tonight, in the presence of Jesus, his vulnerability was laid bare. The firelight flickered on Peter's face as he stared into the flames, avoiding Jesus' gaze. His heart was heavy, his thoughts swirling in a storm of self-doubt and fear. For a long moment there was only silence. The other disciples sat still, waiting, unsure of what was to come, but sensing that this was a moment of deep significance. Finally Peter spoke, his voice low and filled with emotion. "Master," Peter began, his voice trembling, "I have failed you. Over and over again, I have fallen short of what you have asked of me. I try to be strong, to lead as you have called me to, but every time the storms of life come, I am shaken. I falter. I fear. I doubt." Peter's words hung in the air, thick with the weight of his confession. His eyes brimmed with unshed tears as he continued. "You called me the rock," Peter said, his voice cracking with emotion, "but I feel like anything but that. How can I be the rock when I am so easily broken? How can I lead others when I am lost myself?" The rawness of Peter's confession left the other disciples in stunned silence. They had seen Peter's strength, his boldness, but now they were witnessing the depth of his inner turmoil. And as they listened, they each began to feel their own struggles rise to the surface. Their own doubts and fears, the moments when they too had felt like they were not enough. Jesus, still calm and patient, reached out and placed a hand on Peter's shoulder. The warmth of his touch was like a balm to Peter's weary soul, and in that moment, Peter felt a wave of peace wash over him, though the storm inside had not yet fully passed. "Peter," Jesus said softly, his voice full of love and understanding, "you are not alone in feeling this way. The storms you face, the doubts, the fears, the moments when you feel like you cannot stand, they are not unique to you. We all face storms, both within and without." Peter looked up at Jesus, tears now spilling freely down his cheeks. His heart was breaking open, all the weight he had been carrying for so long now laid bare before his master. "But Master," Peter said, his voice barely above a whisper, "how do I stand when I feel so weak? How do I rise again when I keep falling?" Jesus looked around at the other disciples, his gaze sweeping over each one of them. He knew that Peter's question was not his alone. They all needed to hear the answer. They all needed to understand the truth about resilience, about the strength that comes not from never falling, but from always rising. "Let me tell you a story," Jesus said, his voice calm and full of wisdom, "a story about a tree and a storm. Once there was a farmer who planted a tree in the middle of his field. The tree was young and fragile when it was first planted, its roots not yet deep, its branches not yet strong. But the farmer tended to it daily, watering it, protecting it from the elements, and making sure it had the nutrients it needed to grow. As the seasons passed, the tree grew taller and stronger. Its branches stretched toward the sky, and its roots began to sink deep into the earth. The farmer was proud of the tree, for it had become a symbol of strength and resilience, standing tall in the middle of the field, a testament to the care it had received. But one day a great storm arose. The winds howled, the rain poured down in torrents, and the ground shook with the force of the storm. The farmer watched in fear as many of the trees in his field were uprooted, their shallow roots unable to withstand the fury of the storm. When the storm finally passed, the farmer walked through his field, surveying the damage. Many trees had fallen, their branches broken, their roots exposed. But when he came to the tree he had planted in the middle of the field, he saw that it was still standing. Its branches were battered, its leaves torn, but its roots had held firm. The farmer knelt down beside the tree, examining it closely. He realized that the tree's roots had not only grown deep but had also spread wide, intertwining with the roots of other trees nearby. Beneath the surface, a hidden network of roots had formed, creating a strong foundation that had allowed the tree to withstand the storm. The farmer understood then that the tree had survived not because it was the strongest or the tallest, but because it was connected to something greater than itself. It had been supported by the strength of the trees around it, and together, they had formed a foundation that no storm could break. Jesus paused, letting the story sink into the hearts of his disciples. The night had fully descended now, and the stars twinkled overhead, but the disciples were no longer aware of the passing of time. They were fully present, hanging on every word their master spoke. "You see, Peter," Jesus said, turning back to his disciple, "you are like that tree. The storms of life will come, they are inevitable. There will be moments when you feel battered by the winds of doubt, shaken by the rains of fear. But you will not fall because your roots are deep and they are connected to something greater." Peter looked up, confusion and hope mingling in his expression. "But Master," he said, "what if my roots are not strong enough? What if I am not enough?" Jesus smiled, a warm and loving smile that reached his eyes. "Resilience, Peter, is not about being the strongest or the tallest. It is not about never falling. It is about knowing that when you fall, you will rise again, not by your strength alone, but by the strength of those around you, by the love that holds you up, by the faith that runs deep within you." Peter's tears began to flow again, but this time they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of release, of understanding, of hope. He had been carrying the weight of his doubts and fears for so long, believing that he had to be strong on his own. But now, in the presence of Jesus, he realized that he did not have to carry that burden alone. "You are not alone, Peter," Jesus continued, his voice soft but full of power. "Your roots are connected to me, to your brothers here, and to the faith that has been planted in your heart. You may bend, you may sway, but you will not break, because you are not standing on your own." The other disciples, who had been listening intently, began to feel the weight of their own burdens lift. They too had struggled with doubts, with fears, with feelings of inadequacy. But now, hearing Jesus' words, they realized that they were not alone in their struggles. They were connected to one another, to Jesus, and to the faith that bound them together. John, sitting nearby, spoke up softly. "Master, we have all felt this way at times. We have all faced storms that made us feel like we couldn't stand. But now I see that we are not meant to stand alone." Jesus nodded, his eyes full of love for his disciples. "Yes, John. You are not alone. None of you are. You are like the trees in the farmer's field, your roots intertwined, supporting one another through the storms of life. And just as those trees stood strong together, so too will you stand as long as you remain connected to one another and to the faith that binds you." The fire crackled softly in the background as the disciples sat in silence, absorbing the depth of Jesus' words. There was a shift in the air, a sense of something powerful moving among them. They had always known they were a group, a fellowship, but tonight they felt that connection in a way they had never felt before. Peter, still sitting beside Jesus, wiped the tears from his eyes and looked around at his brothers. For the first time in a long while, he felt the weight of his burdens lift. He had always believed that he needed to be strong for everyone else, that he had to carry the weight of leadership on his own. But now he understood that his strength came not from standing alone, but from standing together. "We are stronger together," Peter whispered, the realization dawning on him. "I don't have to be the rock on my own. We are all part of this foundation." Jesus smiled, seeing the understanding take root in Peter's heart. "Yes, Peter. You will be the rock, but not because you are unshakable. You will be the rock because you will rise, again and again, no matter how many times you fall. And each time you rise, you will be stronger, not because of your own strength but because of the strength of those who stand with you." The disciples, moved by Peter's words and Jesus' teachings, felt a profound sense of peace settle over them. They had faced many storms together, both physical and emotional, but now they understood that they were not meant to face them alone. They were a family bound together by faith, by love, and by the strength that came from being rooted in something greater than themselves. Tears of joy filled their eyes as they looked at one another, not with pity or sorrow, but with a deep sense of connection and purpose. They had all faced moments of doubt, moments where they felt like they couldn't go on, but now they knew that they didn't have to carry those burdens alone. "We are the branches," John said quietly, "and Jesus is the vine. We are connected, and through him we have the strength to endure." Jesus nodded, his heart full of love for his disciples. "Yes, John. You are all branches of the same vine. As long as you remain connected to me and to one another, you will have the strength to face any storm that comes your way." The night grew darker, but the hearts of the disciples were filled with light. They had come to the sea that evening carrying their own burdens, their own doubts, their own fears. But now, in the presence of Jesus, they had found something greater than themselves, a strength that came not from avoiding the storms of life, but from facing them together. As they stood to leave, the air was filled with a quiet joy, a deep peace that came from knowing they were not alone. The weight of their struggles, their fears, and their doubts had been lifted, replaced by a profound sense of belonging and purpose. Peter, standing beside Jesus, felt a warmth in his heart that he hadn't felt in a long time. The doubts that had plagued him for so long were still there, but now they no longer had the power to control him. He knew that he would face storms again, there would be moments of weakness, moments of fear, but now he understood that resilience was not about never falling. It was about rising no matter how many times he fell. And as the disciples walked together along the shore, their footsteps in sync, their hearts connected, they knew that whatever storms lay ahead, they would rise, together. Rooted in love, faith, and the unshakable strength of their Master, they would endure. For they were not alone. And in that knowledge they found true resilience, and with it, a joy that no storm could ever take away. This is end of the story. Please like this video and subscribe this channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.